Hi, I'm Roy, and I'm joined today by Mitchell.
Hi, Roy.
Hi, Mitchell. And we're going to do our pre-show today, getting you ready for worship. We're in our third week of our This Is Us series.
That's
Today
right.
we're talking about justice.
Justice.
We did belonging, purpose, then justice. So the This Is Us is talking about our mission statement. It's a proposed mission statement that we've developed. I'll read it real fast. To magnify God's love for all people by creating space for belonging, purpose, justice, and joy.
Yeah.
So why did you instigate this process, or did you instigate the process for the mission statement, and what was sort of the purpose behind getting to this point?
Well, I think, coming out of a pandemic and so living in a post-pandemic world and, within the denomination, we've had disaffiliation happening. So there was this sort of, I think, need for us to recalibrate and pay attention to like who we are and how do we proclaim that, how do we claim it for ourselves, proclaim it to the world, but also how do we then like get behind something where we can kind of all be pulling in the same direction. And I kind of reject a lot of the corporate feels that come along with mission statements and core values and vision statements. I think the church already has a pretty clear purpose, but it is really important for churches to get serious about how they live that out. And our mission statement is really, how do we at FirstChurch live out the gospel in the best ways that we know how with the gifts that we have? And I'm really grateful that we have this sort of proposed mission statement as a way to sort of coalesce around something and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. And so I didn't come up with it. That was sort of a process that happened in committee, but I did sort of urge us to get serious about claiming something.
There's this desire, I think, among churches to push back against mission statements because they say, well, it's just clear that our mission is to do God's work or Jesus' work in the world.
Yeah.
But I think
to make disciples of all nations, right? To baptize.
The Methodist Church already have a mission
right,
statement.
Sure. We do.
But I think it's important to acknowledge that we work connectionally, and the Methodist Church is working, let's say, in North Texas area, but each individual local church plays a specific role in that realm. So we're not all doing the same thing.
No, because we don't exist in the same sort of environments, right? I mean, we have our own unique mission field, our own unique context. We have our calling. We have a group of committed Christians that have their own gifts and graces. And so it's really important for us to do that discernment work.
Right. So there are things
for
we're
ourselves.
doing as a downtown church that suburban churches aren't going to do.
Yeah, as a downtown church in Dallas, Texas, right? Yeah.
Or as a church that has a long history with the arts where other churches don't have that history, and that's not as something that's as important for them.
Yeah, exactly.
So the first week we talked about belonging. Why was belonging in the conversations with the mission, vision, and strategy team, why was that something that you wanted to hone in on?
Well, I think a lot of churches in the United States, American Christianity, we're seeing a lot of churches that require right belief before someone can belong. And I think it's really important for us to start with belonging because if we can't find a place to belong as individuals who are committed to following Jesus, if we can't find that community, that place of belonging first, we will, I think, lag behind in our spiritual development. And I'm much more interested in folks finding a home and then learning how to grow in their faith than expecting folks to be sort of say the magic words or have perfect orthodoxy and then being admitted in. That runs counter to the gospel. I don't think that's how Jesus operated. Zacchaeus' response to Jesus or his response to the world was really Jesus calling him, giving him identity, giving him a place, and then out of that he responds appropriately, right? So I think it's really important that folks have a sense of belonging. Before we move into, purpose and justice and joy, we really have to be connected somewhere.
Yeah, you saw it. You made me think about in Jesus' ministry all the time. People were saying, "Well, why are you hanging out with that person, or why are you associating with that person?" It's because they're a human being, and the fact that you're saying, "Why am I with that person?" probably indicates that they need my attention more than anyone else.
Exactly. So yeah, I think belonging is essential. We sort of start with belonging, and then we're able to sort of reorient ourselves to the world.
We've also talked about, you've talked about it in the pulpit, and we've talked about it on Studio 3A, the loneliness epidemic,
Yeah,
and how, what role do
totally.
you think the church plays in addressing loneliness?
Well, I mean, there is a lot of opportunity, I think, for folks to find community. We meet regularly, right? It's a weekly thing. It's more than that. It happens multiple times in a week that people have a place to come to gather, to simply gather in community. So the church plays just a practical function in that epidemic of loneliness. And sort of curbing it. But I also think that when we can be our true selves, our authentic selves, when we can show up and belong, we have we then have an opportunity to be known, and that is really how we're going to curb this issue of loneliness. Is where are the spaces in our life where we're truly known, and if we stop showing up, folks would notice and care, and that really comes about from being known. And so, if we can create space for folks to find belonging, be who God created them to be, and they can become known, then they can become interwoven into the fabric of a community. And I think that's the church's role, is to make sure that folks have a place to be known.
So I'm hearing more a depth to belonging than I think I would imagine at first pass.
Yeah.
This idea of being known and heard, and I liked what you said about people noticing that you're not there. Because a lot of times I think church can be comfortable because you can have sort of an anonymity to it. You can come into
Absolutely.
the pew and experience it on your own. But you're saying that you want it to be something a lot more than that.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between having good hospitality and like being welcoming and making people feel like they can just come and be. That is very important. But belonging is not just feeling comfortable in a space. It's feeling comfortable being known by others in the space. And I think that, that requires time, and it requires intentionality. It just doesn't happen, right? So we have to be intentional about inviting people into that space, and we have to encourage those who may be new or haven't found that yet to be curious about it and go a little deeper so that they can be known.
That's good.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention at the top, we're watching on Facebook and YouTube, so if you want to leave a comment, ask any questions, we'll get that. So last week we talked about purpose. How does belonging feed into purpose?
Yeah, I think, purpose, vocation, I think we're all called by God to do something in this world. And I have found that the times I am most able to hear God and hear that clarity that God is speaking to me with, like, that's happened within community. I think it's really a dangerous thing to think we hear or know what God wants for our lives when we're by ourselves. And so I think that there's a natural discernment that happens in community that can't be manufactured or replicated in any other way. So purpose, I think, is attached to belonging because it is a byproduct of being in community. And I think it requires people asking good questions of one another.
How, you might have just answered that, but how does the church cultivate purpose within people?
Well, I think it's sacramental. So, today we're going to baptize 4 kids in worship, and it's going to be awesome. And in that baptismal liturgy, there's this participation with parents and then also with the church. And through that, we claim an identity, and we claim a very specific task as a community, help those children grow up in the faith. Our faith, our participation in church requires something of us. And so I think when we recognize that we have an identity, we're given a task, as Christians, when we take on that identity, we begin to then see how we can impact the world in a positive way. And so I think that purpose starts with understanding that God is at work in each and every one of our lives, calling us to use the gifts that God has given us for a specific purpose, a reason. They're not for ourselves, they are for others. And I think the church has a role, a pivotal role in helping people sort of move down that path of discernment. And that's the great thing about being, Methodist, is that we believe that faith is actionable, that we have to have an impact in the communities that we live in.
And that it's a process, that it's not something static.
Exactly.
That you're baptized into the faith and you're done.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of the
Yeah,
process.
it's not once saved, always saved. It's not we're just, getting notches on a belt, putting lines on a, chalkboard of how many people we're saving. That's not the impetus of our work. It is that, we're called to be really engaged in the world, and that we can participate in the transformation that God is doing.
So that leads us well into justice, which is the topic that Anthony will be preaching about today.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are hesitant about the church getting involved in justice work. I know I've had people say to me that they come to church for it to be an apolitical space because of how they were raised, that they felt church was too involved in politics. Mm-hmm. And whenever you're getting into justice, there's inherently a political element to it. Mm-hmm. So what role do you think the church plays when it comes to justice?
Well, I think everything is political. Even claiming they're apolitical spaces is making a political statement. And so, if we just think of politics as the way we organize ourselves in community, and creating healthy boundaries and identities within that community, everything's political. The gospel is inherently political. I think what folks confuse, the political nature of the gospel with like American political systems, and so partisanship, right? And so, I think that churches cannot follow, right? If they're following Jesus, they cannot be engaged in the political realities of the world. What I think is dangerous is when churches adopt political ideologies, partisan politics, and then try to make the gospel fit their political agendas.
Right.
But Jesus talked a lot about feeding the poor, and so if that shows up in American politics, that's sort of that's for politicians to sort out, right?
Right.
Church has a role to speak about how we care for the poor, or how we care for the orphans, or how we care for the widows that are in our midst. How do we ensure that strangers are welcome? Like, that's scriptural, that's biblical. We can make bold proclamations about those things because that's what's required of us in our faith. And I think the church has a responsibility to speak to those issues.
It would almost be unchristian to see a society not living up to its ideals and not calling it out.
Right.
So we have to, we are always striving to get to Christian perfection. Society was certainly never reached Christian perfection. And so our communities, our obligation is to point out the ways in which we're falling short of perfection and love.
I would end here, right? John Wesley says that, like, there's personal holiness, right? How do we cultivate personal holiness? But there's also social holiness. How do we participate in that? That will always be political. Yeah.
Okay, a few announcements that we've got, ways that people can belong and find purpose.
Yes.
Look at that segue. So we've got First Serve Sunday coming up. This is next Sunday, August 25th. It's going to be before and after worship. Tell us a little bit about what people can do at First Serve Sunday.
So we are asking that everyone find a place to serve within the church community, that we're not just coming in as anonymous individuals and sort of consuming, that we also give back. And one of the ways we do that is we can, volunteer here in the media room. You can volunteer with our hospitality team. You can teach Sunday school. You can be on our medical team. There's a lot of ways that we can serve. And so First Serve is really just going to show a plethora of opportunities folks have. We're asking that everyone give 1 hour once a month to the work of the church.
And it's also a good way. I know people are like, I want to belong, but I don't know a way to meet people.
Mm-hmm.
And the easiest way to do that is just to volunteer for something, and you're going to meet the other people that
They're
are
serving. Yeah.
Then the pastor's Bible study is going to start on Wednesdays. It's starting September 4th.
Yep, the Wednesday after Labor Day.
What do you like about the pastor's Bible study?
It's an informal space for us to talk about what text will be preached on the upcoming worship service. And it's a really great group of people that ask really great questions. And so it's awesome. Noon on Wednesdays, bring your own lunch, and we have a really good time. It's helped me be a better preacher too.
And I think it's a good way to get the sermon. In some ways, the sermon comes and goes on Sunday.
Yeah.
And so it adds like a stickiness to it if you've sat with it a little before.
Totally.
What's going on there. So that is what we've got coming up. We also have, let's see, I missed one. We've got, it's this page right
First
there.
Steps.
First Steps is coming up on September 8th for people to learn more about the church, particularly people who are thinking about joining. That's the best way to do that is go through First Steps. That'll be coming up on September 8th. So that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us, Mitchell.
Yeah, it was
What's
awesome.
your feedback on your first live at FirstChurch experience?
I love it.
Love it.
Keep going.
Excellent. Thank you, Mitchell.
Keep watching.
We hope that you love it too.
Smash that subscribe button.
Well, yes, you can subscribe, like, comment, and share are all the things that we like people to do.
Do those things.
We hope you've enjoyed watching us today. We hope that you enjoy the service, and we're glad that you belong here, have purpose with us, and some segue into justice.
Great. I'm going to go put on my robe.
See y'all. Thank you.